Millionaire invites his mistress to dinner. Pregnant wife storms in and overturns the table. In a world where gilded mansions and high-stakes ambitions shine as brightly as polished marble, appearances are everything. Within the prestigious streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, Ethan Harrington has cultivated a glittering reputation, an empire built on cunning deals. A lavish manor overlooking the sea, and a poised wife carrying his unborn child. Yet behind every courteous nod and impeccably tailored suit, secrets smolder like embers about to spark an inferno. One fateful night, over fine wine and hushed tones in an exclusive restaurant, tensions erupt into a very public reckoning. Shattered glass and raw heartbreak expose the messy truth nobody dared speak aloud. Ethan Harrington was born into money, old wealth, laced with understated influence. His grandparents built a modest real estate portfolio that, over time, mushroomed into a local empire. His parents, Evelyn and Peter, passed down both the fortune and the prestige, but it was Ethan who took the Harrington brand to new heights. By his mid-20s, he had expanded the family holdings to include high-profile commercial properties, marinas, and swanky residential developments. Magazines hailed him as a visionary, praising his flair for merging architectural elegance with modern convenience. Everywhere he went, he radiated the confidence of a man accustomed to absolute control. But no empire is without its cracks. At social events, neighbors and partners lauded Ethan's strategic thinking, yet murmurs persisted, grumblings about ruthless business tactics, about deals sealed behind tightly closed doors. He paid little mind to the whispers. Success was a shield after all, and he wore it well. Charlotte Montgomery, who became Charlotte Harrington after a whirlwind romance, embodied timeless grace and an intriguing blend of warmth and reserve. She had made her name as a budding fashion designer in Manhattan, balancing gallery showcases with runway appearances. The pair first met under the lofty ceilings of an art gala, where Ethan arrived to charm prospective investors while Charlotte showcased a collection inspired by the Victorian era. Their initial conversation crackled with curiosity and tension. Within 6 months, rumors of an engagement danced around their social circles. The wedding itself was a sumptuous affair on the Harrington estate, a swirl of string quartets, crystal chandeliers, and well-heeled guests. Though Charlotte's connection to Ethan seemed to sparkle with authenticity, seeds of doubt were planted early. Perhaps it was the pace of their courtship, or how perfectly they seemed to complete each other's sentences. Some suspected a strategic merger, her rising star in the world of fashion fused to his real estate dominion. She believed Ethan loved her for who she truly was. Yet, in certain unguarded moments, she wondered if he was attracted more to the idea of having a cultured, talented wife on his arm, a worthy adornment to enhance his image. Time passed. Charlotte's once busy schedule of design meetings and fashion events slowed when she learned she was pregnant. She agreed with Ethan that nurturing their future child was paramount, but a faint voice in her head lamented how easily she set aside her career. Meanwhile, Ethan pressed on with his developments, boasting about how fatherhood would inspire him to secure bigger, better deals. Even so, his presence at home felt increasingly sporadic. Gradually, Charlotte noticed discreet changes, phone calls he took away from her earshot, unexplained late nights at the office, and a stale cologne scent on his suits that did not belong to him or her. Denise, Ethan's cheerful personal assistant, initially appeared loyal to Charlotte. Yet Charlotte suspected that some of Denise's professional updates, his meeting schedules, and travel plans grew incomplete. It was as though Ethan had compartmentalized his life into spheres: official business, family obligations, and something that swam in the shadows. Charlotte questioned her own suspicions, unwilling to disrupt her ideal of a loving marriage. She reminded herself that rumors can thrive in the upscale enclaves of Greenwich, fueled by envy as much as truth. Still, she couldn't ignore the glances friends exchanged at country club brunches whenever she mentioned Ethan's extensive business trips. And when Charlotte confided in her closest confidant, Lydia, she was met with silence and a sympathetic squeeze of the hand, confirmation that Lydia, too, sensed something was amiss but couldn't bring herself to confirm it. In a last-ditch effort to quell her anxiety, Charlotte tried discussing her worries with Ethan directly. He brushed them off, offering carefully rehearsed platitudes. "Everything I do for our family." She wanted to believe him, though her instincts warned otherwise. Perhaps she might have endured the uncertainty a bit longer, if not for a final red flag, a credit card bill that listed repeated charges to an upscale downtown hotel, always on nights when Ethan claimed to be tied up in client dinners or late negotiations. An ache settled in Charlotte's chest. She felt both naive and resentful. Despite her reluctance to suspect the worst, all indicators pointed to the existence of another woman. Desperate for clarity, she hired a discreet private investigator named Gregory Stone. Meeting him in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, she divulged her suspicions. Gregory's calm, methodical demeanor reassured her. He promised to provide evidence one way or another. If Ethan was faithful, Charlotte could breathe easy. If not, she would possess tangible proof. Over the coming weeks, her sleep turned restless. She would stare at the ceiling for hours, imagining Ethan's possible betrayals. She forced down the growing panic by busying herself with preparations for the baby's arrival, choosing curtains, testing paint swatches, and painstakingly reading up on safe cribs. Her designs for a potential comeback fashion collection lay abandoned, overshadowed by her personal turmoil. Then one chilly evening, Gregory sent her a text that sent her heart into a tailspin. "We need to talk. I have photos and timestamps. The affair is real." Charlotte's hands trembled as she read his message. Reality slammed into her with crushing force. With 4 months left in her pregnancy, she was about to confront the betrayal that loomed like a thunderhead over her carefully ordered life. Only one final spark was needed to ignite the entire fuse, and that match was struck when Charlotte discovered her husband's dinner reservation at a clandestine restaurant known for shielding wealthy patrons' secrets. Mentally prepared for confrontation, she climbed into her car, determined that this night would no longer belong to Ethan and his mistress. It was time for the truth to explode into the open. As Charlotte steeled herself for battle, another figure in the unfolding drama prepared for a very different kind of evening. Isabella Marlow considered herself more than just Ethan Harrington's mistress. A graduate of a prestigious university, she had pursued a career in corporate strategy before being sidetracked by personal ambition. Upon accepting a position as Ethan's special projects coordinator, she soon discovered his penchant for power and secrecy meshed perfectly with her desire to ascend life's ladder swiftly. In the beginning, Isabella's intentions seemed professional. She admired his swift decision-making and the influence he wielded in the real estate arena. Over countless late nights discussing projects in hushed tones, an illicit spark ignited. Perhaps it was the glint in Ethan's eye when she secured a difficult deal, or the gentle hand he sometimes placed at the small of her back as they exited conference rooms. Step by step, Isabella slipped into an affair that promised excitement and financial rewards far beyond her salary. Ethan, for his part, found in Isabella the thrill he lacked at home. She was sharp, daring, and in on his subtlest manipulations. He gifted her with luxuries, designer purses, diamond earrings, even weekend getaways in exclusive resorts. Secret meetings filled with half-lies and rationalizations became the norm. Over time, they shaped their own realm, isolated from the prying eyes of co-workers and sanitized from moral introspection. Still, Isabella sometimes wrestled with guilt. She would catch glimpses of Charlotte's portrait in Ethan's office and feel a twinge. Yet she told herself Charlotte was a sheltered society wife, uninterested in Ethan's true passions. If Charlotte wasn't fulfilling her husband's every need, why should Isabella hold back? This perspective crystallized the night Ethan first stayed over at Isabella's plush apartment. As she watched him stare out her penthouse window at the sprawling city lights, she asked the question that had simmered beneath the surface for weeks. When will you leave her? Ethan had sighed, gently promising that when the timing was right, when business deals wouldn't implode and the unborn child wasn't in jeopardy, he would separate from Charlotte. Isabella latched onto that promise. She chose to believe it, but weeks turned to months, and the baby's birth drew nearer. Ethan began showing signs of strain, juggling the demands of fatherhood preparation with their covert affair. He skipped a couple of scheduled meetings with her. He sometimes seemed distant. Isabella resented feeling sidelined, suspecting he'd never truly give up the prestige of a stable marriage. When she tried to push him for clarity, he only grew more evasive. The night of the infamous dinner, Isabella felt an odd mix of eagerness and impatience. Ethan had suggested they meet at l'Ambroisie Verdi, an exclusive restaurant revered for its strict privacy policy. In hushed phone calls, he mentioned needing to finalize their arrangement to talk about how they'd move forward. This sounded like progress to Isabella. A flicker of hope told her maybe Ethan was ready for the next step. If he was serious about divorcing Charlotte, perhaps he would publicly claim Isabella as his partner. When Isabella arrived, heads turned. She wore a sleek black gown that highlighted her figure, projecting the confidence she privately struggled to maintain. She swept through the candlelit foyer with the self-assurance of a woman who believed her star was on the rise. In the private dining alcove, Ethan awaited her, glancing at the discreet waitstaff to confirm that no cameras or curious guests lurked nearby. She took her seat, carefully crossing her legs. "I'm glad you finally invited me to a respectable venue," she said pointedly, referencing all those furtive hotel suites and remote getaways that made her feel more like a hidden vice than a cherished lover. Ethan offered a tense smile. "I owed you a proper evening, yes. Let's order and talk in comfort." A waiter glided over, and they made their selections: exotic appetizers, delicate entrees, and an expensive bottle of wine. Once alone, Isabella leaned in. "So, are you ready to make things public? How do you plan to handle Charlotte, especially with the baby due?" He fiddled with the corner of his napkin, choosing his words carefully. "I need to ensure that the business remains stable. Public perception matters a lot right now. My board is jittery. We're on the cusp of major deals. A scandalous divorce could spook investors. So I'm still a risk factor," Isabella said, her tone laced with bitterness. "Do you honestly expect me to wait in limbo indefinitely, content with empty promises?" Ethan's gaze flickered with frustration. "Give me time. Once the baby is born and the deals are secured, I can negotiate a private settlement with Charlotte. That's when we can transition into us." Those words, half appealing and half repugnant, hung between them. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, suppressing the swirl of anger and desperation. She wanted to believe him but recognized a pattern. Yet, a mix of love, ambition, and fear bound her to him. The soft glow of table lamps, the gentle murmur of other discreet conversations, the subdued clink of cutlery, everything around them felt intimately secretive. And perhaps the night would have ended quietly, a private arrangement sealed with hushed words and sips of wine, if only fate had allowed. But destiny often has cruel timing, and tonight was no different. Outside, Charlotte had already arrived, her heart hammering in her chest. She was minutes from unleashing a storm that would engulf them all. Isabella, lost in discussing the future with Ethan, had no inkling of the explosion about to erupt. Even Ethan, despite his anxious glances at the entrance, could not have predicted the ferocity of the confrontation that would soon shatter the polished calm of l'Ambroisie Verdi. Charlotte's knees felt wobbly as she stepped out of her car. The illuminated sign of l'Ambroisie Verdi greeted her like a silent sentinel, as though daring her to proceed. She took a steadying breath. Clutching her purse, which held the phone brimming with evidence, she headed for the discreet side entrance. A polished doorman asked for her reservation, and she calmly mentioned she was meeting her husband, Ethan Harrington. The mention of the Harrington name parted any remaining resistance. Within moments, she was ushered inside, the staff too eager to please a wealthy patron to question the lack of a formal reservation. Once in the softly lit corridor, she could already sense the hushed elegance designed to protect high-profile clients from public scrutiny. But tonight there would be no privacy for her husband's covert plans. Inside the private alcove, Ethan and Isabella spoke in tense undertones. Isabella frowned at the worry lines etched across Ethan's forehead. "You haven't touched your wine," she noted, swirling the crimson liquid in her own glass. "Afraid you'll lose your nerve?" Before he could respond, Charlotte's voice sliced through the air. He should be afraid of a lot more than that. Both turned in sync, faces registering shock and horror. Isabella nearly dropped her glass, while Ethan stood so abruptly that his chair teetered. The hush that fell over the restaurant was immediate. Only the faint background music and the distant murmur of other diners persisted. "Charlotte," Ethan began, his voice betraying a tremor. What are you doing here?" Tears burned at the edges of Charlotte's eyes, but fury fueled her composure. "I could ask you the same, except I already know this isn't some innocent business dinner." Isabella placed her glass down, trying to maintain composure. "This is a private conversation," she said in a clipped tone. "You shouldn't be here?" Charlotte finished, anger boiling over. "Oh, I should be at home, right? Waiting like a fool while my husband carries on with his mistress?" She directed a blistering glare at Isabella. "I hope the role of second fiddle suits you, because that's all you'll ever be." Ethan reached out, maybe to place a hand on Charlotte's arm, but she recoiled. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "I trusted you, defended you against rumors." And all the while, this was going on. He stumbled through half-formed excuses. "Please, let's step outside. We can talk privately." "No." Charlotte's tone solidified. "I want the world to see what you truly are, the devoted husband parading around town with a woman behind his pregnant wife's back." A waiter inched forward, distress evident, unsure if he should intervene. Isabella shot him a frigid glance, which caused him to retreat. The rest of the diners strained to catch glimpses of the drama through parted curtains and plush dividers. Murmurs rippled through the restaurant as staff tried, in vain, to preserve the hush. They prided themselves on, Ethan's hands balled into fists. "Charlotte, please, don't beg," she spat. "You only ever beg when you're about to lose something important. It's always about you, your deals, your empire, your image." She turned her glare on Isabella. "And you? Did you think he'd actually leave me for you? You might have the glamour, but he'll never risk his fortune over love or lust." Isabella bristled, cheeks reddening. He deserves someone who stands by him, not someone who tears him down. Charlotte felt a blaze of indignation. "If I weren't tearing him down, I'd have done so the moment I suspected your affair. Instead, I tried to be a supportive wife, ignoring the cracks. But those days are done." She slammed a hand on the table. It rattled, nearly toppling the expensive bottle of wine. A hush fell once again, but the tension screamed louder than any outburst. Then, in a single burst of furious energy, Charlotte grabbed the edge of the table and heaved. Expensive china soared, wine splattered across the floor like spilled blood. Isabella let out a stunned gasp, stumbling backwards to avoid the spray. Ethan watched in horror as plates shattered, a thunderous clatter that drew every eye in the restaurant. In that instant, crystal and porcelain shards became symbols of their fractured life. Charlotte's breath came in ragged gasps. Her pregnant silhouette, taut with rage and heartbreak, riveted everyone's attention. Yet, behind the anger, tears shone in her eyes, reflecting despair over a marriage turned to ash. "This is what you've done," she whispered, voice trembling. "You've broken more than plates tonight." Ethan was speechless. He tried to reach for Charlotte, but she spun around and stormed out, ignoring the manager's desperate attempts to calm her. A hush so thick it felt suffocating weighed upon the dining area, broken only by the crunch of broken glass underfoot. Isabella stood motionless, stunned, her heart thudding. She looked at Ethan, who pressed a hand to his forehead as though in disbelief. Waitstaff hovered, trying to salvage what was left of the meal, or at least coax the diners back to their own business. But the moment was too searing, too dramatic to be contained. Ethan finally found his voice. "I need to go after her," he said, voice cracked with panic. Isabella felt panic surge in her chest. "What about me? You can't just leave me here with this mess." But he was already turning away, stepping through the broken remnants of their dinner. Cameras in smartphones clicked, capturing the humiliating scene. Whatever illusions had protected them before this night were gone. Ethan bolted from the alcove, half running past stunned guests and staff, leaving Isabella among the scattered plates, the splashed wine, and the pungent stench of shattered propriety. By the next morning, the Harrington scandal was the only topic in Greenwich high society. Snippets of video footage, though the restaurant tried to keep phones stowed, had managed to leak. Conversations buzzed at country clubs, spa lounges, and morning brunch tables. Social media flared with speculation. Had the pregnant Miss S. Harrington truly overturned a table? Who was the other woman? And most pressing, would Ethan's business empire survive this blow? Within Harrington Manor, a tense silence reigned. Charlotte had locked herself in the master suite overnight. She neither answered Ethan's calls nor opened the door. He was forced to sleep in a guest room, left alone with the echoes of his public humiliation. Just a floor above him, Charlotte's tears had run dry, replaced by a quiet, resolute anger. She felt a swirl of emotions, from betrayal to fierce protectiveness of her unborn child. In the morning, Charlotte made 2 calls. The first was to Thomas Bentley, her family's attorney, to discuss the prenuptial contract. The second was to Gregory Stone, the private investigator who had gathered conclusive evidence of Ethan's affair. She needed to understand her legal standing, whether it meant separation, a formal divorce, or some other path. More than anything, she wanted to ensure that her child's future was protected. After arranging meetings, Charlotte finally emerged from her room. She descended the grand staircase to find Ethan pacing the foyer. The moment he saw her, he approached with hands half raised, as though entreating a wounded animal. "Charlotte, please just talk to me. Yell at me if you must. Anything but this silence." She paused, arms crossed over her chest, eyes cold. "I'm meeting my lawyer. That's the only conversation that matters right now." His shoulders sagged. "I know I messed up. 1, I don't have an excuse other than sheer stupidity and selfishness. But let's discuss the baby. Our child deserves a father who honors his vows." She snapped. "You think a handful of apologies undoes what I saw last night?" She took a steadying breath. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? For me and for our future child? You've flaunted your affair in public, maybe quietly before, but now the entire town knows." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I never intended to hurt you. I was trying to keep business afloat." "Business," She spat the word as though it tasted foul. That's what we are, right? A deal you made to portray the perfect family. Maybe we were always just another step in your climb, something you didn't consider worth preserving once it got complicated. She left him standing in the hallway, a swirl of guilt and panic in his eyes. Minutes later, she stepped into her car and instructed the driver to head downtown. She had no desire to linger in a house that now felt more like a gilded prison than a home. Meanwhile, Isabella woke up in her own apartment, feeling the sting of the previous night's fiasco. Numerous calls from gossip columnists blinked across her phone, and a few from friends, some curious, others genuinely concerned. She resisted checking social media. The last thing she wanted was to see the public's condemnation of her. Instead, she scoured the news websites. In the coverage, she was painted as a callous seductress, a home wrecker. The undercurrent of shame and defiance left her unsettled. Her phone buzzed with a call from Ethan. For a moment, she considered ignoring him, remembering how abruptly he'd bolted after Charlotte. But she answered, wanting to know what came next. "What do we do?" she blurted before he could speak. He sighed heavily. "I'm doing damage control. My PR consultant is drafting a statement about personal challenges. That's all I can say publicly. As for us," his voice trailed off. A spike of dread ran through her. "Don't tell me you're backtracking. You said you wanted a future with me." "Yes, but it's not that simple," Ethan interjected. "Charlotte's furious. And she's pregnant. If she files for divorce citing infidelity, I'll be in a very weak position financially and socially. There's also the child. Public backlash could ruin my deals." Rage flared in Isabella's chest. "So you want to pin this on me? Or do you want me to lie low while you try to keep your wife from divorcing you?" "I need you to keep a low profile," he admitted, voice taut with worry. "Maybe once things settle." She let out a bitter laugh. "You keep asking me to stay hidden, waiting for you to handle things. When do I get to live openly? Or are you stringing me along like a puppet while you salvage your empire?" "It's not like that," he insisted. "I just need time." His words echoed hollowly. Isabella ended the call, simmering in frustration. She had chosen to believe Ethan's promises, but after the spectacle of the night before, any illusions of a smooth transition into his life had shattered. She felt used, yet deep down she still craved the life he represented: wealth, influence, the thrill of being close to real power. That afternoon, 2 separate legal consultations took place in different corners of Greenwich. Charlotte met with Thomas Bentley, reviewing her prenuptial terms. A critical clause included heavier penalties for Ethan if an affair could be proven, something she had in spades. She felt a measure of vindication, but the complexities involving custody and child support weighed on her. She was not a vindictive person by nature, but Ethan's betrayal had struck her at her core. Across town, in a glossy penthouse office, Ethan sat with his attorney, Marion West, along with his PR specialist. They charted strategies to stem investor panic. Marion warned him that if Charlotte pressed for a divorce with those infidelity clauses, he could lose more than half his holdings. The old Ethan would have brushed it off, confident in his ability to negotiate. Now, he recognized how precariously everything hung by a thread. His brand, his image, his fortune potentially all at stake, thanks to his own recklessness. In the ensuing days, real estate deals teetered, with some partners demanding clearer commitments from Ethan's camp, wary of scandal. The tabloids gleaned more details, printing incriminating photos from the restaurant scene. Rumors about Charlotte's next move ran rampant, from the possibility of a swift divorce to claims she might flee to Europe or retreat to a remote family estate. Inside the tumult, Charlotte remained quiet. She needed time to decide whether to salvage fragments of her marriage or burn every bridge and start anew. The heartbreak was raw, but a practical voice told her that cutting ties too rashly might hurt her unborn child's security. She vacillated between fury, despair, and an aching nostalgia for the early days of their relationship, before Ethan's duplicity overshadowed everything. As the gossip churned, and as Ethan scrambled to plug holes in his sinking reputation, a single fact loomed above all else. The Harrington family facade was irreparably cracked. No matter how fervently Ethan tried to restore it, no matter what calm statements or lavish apologies he offered, the foundations of trust and fidelity were gone. And now, 3 lives, Ethan's, Charlotte's, and Isabella's, were locked in a web of betrayal that only tightened the more they struggled to break free. In the weeks following the restaurant fiasco, Charlotte withdrew from public view. She turned down invitations to upscale luncheons and charity balls, refusing to play the part of a dutiful socialite in the midst of her turmoil. The Harrington estate felt stifling. She caught glimpses of Ethan pacing on phone calls or burying himself in files within his study. Their interactions were minimal and frostbitten. The household staff tiptoed around the tension. One afternoon, she ventured into the garden, a sprawling oasis complete with marble statues and carefully manicured hedges. There, under a weeping willow, she ran into Zachary Coleman, an old acquaintance who had collaborated with Ethan on prior development projects. Zachary was more than a business associate. He and Charlotte had exchanged pleasant conversations at social gatherings over the years. He'd come by to discuss a pending real estate venture with Ethan, only to learn from the butler that Ethan was out. As they exchanged polite greetings, Charlotte sensed genuine empathy in Zachary's warm gaze. He asked about her health and the baby, carefully sidestepping the scandal. She appreciated the tact, finding it far more comforting than the forced pity or the blatant curiosity she usually encountered. "You don't look well," Zachary said gently, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. "I know it's none of my business, but if you ever need a break from all this," she offered a faint smile. "It's hard to run from your own life, especially when you're carrying a little one inside. But thanks." He paused, as though weighing his next words. "For what it's worth, I've always admired your strength. Even before all of this, you have a rare blend of class and resilience. Don't let anyone, least of all Ethan, overshadow that." The sincerity in his voice touched her. "You're kind to say so. Right now, I'm just trying not to drown in the chaos he's unleashed." They stood there amidst the rustling leaves, a hush enveloping them. For a brief moment, Charlotte felt seen as a person, not just the wife or the scorned figure in a scandal. She exhaled slowly, feeling a tension lift from her shoulders. Zachary's presence reminded her that she was still capable of forging connections outside the twisted narrative. Ethan's choices had created. Over the next few days, a quiet rapport developed between them. Zachary visited under the pretext of finalizing contractual paperwork with Ethan, but he would often linger in the garden with Charlotte if Ethan remained absent. They spoke in measured tones about art, music, and neutral topics, but occasionally touched on personal matters, her uncertain future, his own experiences navigating the cutthroat world of real estate. Although she tried to keep her guard up, Charlotte appreciated the chance to converse without being met by pity or condemnation. Ethan, engrossed in salvaging his business, only gradually noticed the friendly exchanges. He began to sense a subtle shift in the dynamic whenever he entered a room with them. Charlotte would straighten her posture and speak more guardedly, while Zachary's eyes flickered with an unreadable expression. Initially, Ethan dismissed it as paranoia, but as the days passed, his ego found fresh fuel for anxiety. A gnawing thought took hold. Could Charlotte be finding solace in Zachary's attention? Meanwhile, Isabella's life also twisted in unforeseen ways. She maintained her corporate role, but faced scornful whispers from colleagues who suspected her liaison with the boss. Her sense of isolation deepened, and she spent more evenings alone in her swanky apartment, nursing a hollow ache that no amount of fine wine could fill. She avoided public gatherings, reluctant to fuel the rumor mill. One evening, while scrolling through old photos on her phone, a mix of business events, stolen kisses with Ethan, and glimpses of lavish hotel suites, Isabella came across a folder containing pictures she'd surreptitiously taken. They depicted Charlotte in innocent moments, stepping out of her car, meeting with an attorney, chatting with Zachary in the garden. Isabella had followed Charlotte once or twice, fueled by a strange combination of jealousy and curiosity. Now, staring at the image of Charlotte smiling, Isabella felt a pang of conflicted emotion. Charlotte's expression wasn't triumphant or smug. If anything, it seemed tinged with sadness. A barrage of complicated feelings surged. Isabella wondered if she had grossly oversimplified Charlotte's role in Ethan's life, dismissing her as a pampered princess who didn't appreciate him. Indeed, Charlotte was not the detached trophy wife Isabella had imagined. She was a woman grappling with heartbreak, and Isabella had played a central part in that suffering. Yet, Isabella also recognized that stepping away from Ethan meant giving up the promise of a life. She'd striven toward power, influence, wealth. Late that night, Isabella's phone lit up with a message from Ethan. "I'm arranging an investor meeting tomorrow. Need your insights on commercial expansions. Let's meet at 2 p.m. It was all business, with no mention of affection or apology. She tossed the phone aside, feeling used. But she still planned to attend. Professional obligations were all she had left to maintain even a tenuous link with him. Back in the Harrington home, Charlotte found herself pondering her next step. For all her rage, something held her back from immediately filing for divorce. She questioned if severing ties before the baby's birth would ignite a vicious custody war. Did she have the strength to fight not just for her dignity, but for her child's future? Gradually, she recognized a sobering truth. Her life had already changed irrevocably, with or without a formal legal decision. The illusions of perfect matrimony were shattered, replaced by a lonely resolve to prioritize her own well-being and that of her baby. If that meant forging quiet alliances like her growing friendship with Zachary, so be it. Neither Ethan nor Isabella had any notion that these small comfort zones Charlotte and Zachary were creating could become pivotal in the storm yet to come. While Ethan chased profit and Isabella weighed her ambitions, Charlotte slowly, cautiously, discovered reservoirs of support she never imagined. And in doing so, she gathered the strength that might one day overshadow both her husband's empire and his mistress's schemes. As the scandal roiled on, Ethan's once unassailable business aura dimmed. Several investors began to waver, alarmed by the negative press, and Ethan's apparently fraught domestic situation. Pressure mounted for Ethan to publicly restore confidence. Even Donovan Rise, a real estate magnate who had been eyeing a partnership with Harrington Real Estate, delayed signing final papers. To many in the industry, it seemed Ethan's personal unraveling foreshadowed potential cracks in his financial stability. In an attempt to showcase stability, Ethan invited Donovan and a handful of other heavyweights to a cocktail reception at a luxury hotel. The gathering oozed refinement, live jazz, impeccable hors d'oeuvre, and top-tier champagne. But beneath the polished surface simmered a sense that everyone was scrutinizing Ethan for signs of weakness. Zachary Coleman was also present, representing one of the major firms tangentially involved in a new waterfront development project. As he nursed a sparkling water by the bar, he spotted Ethan in the center of a small group, projecting confidence but looking visibly drained. While Ethan regaled the investors with talk of expansion, Zachary could see the lines of tension bracketing his mouth. "Isn't it curious," came a mocking voice to Zachary's left, "how quickly the mighty can stumble?" He turned to see Donovan Reyes approaching, a thin smile on his lips. Zachary shrugged. Running a large operation is never easy. Even someone like Ethan isn't invulnerable to personal setbacks. Donovan raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to put it. From what I hear, it's more than a simple setback. He's facing potential upheaval at home, prenuptial clauses, a pregnant wife who might walk away with half his fortune if she files for adultery." Zachary kept his expression neutral, unwilling to betray any personal knowledge. "Gossip aside, Ethan's business acumen is proven. That's why you wanted to partner with him, no?" "Certainly," Donovan replied, swirling the liquor in his glass. "But the market hates uncertainty. And nothing spells uncertainty like a high-profile scandal and an angry spouse. One misstep, and the Harrington brand loses its gloss." Zachary quietly absorbed this. He cared little for Donovan's opportunism, but he understood it was part of the industry's ruthless nature. "Time will tell," he said simply, moving away to avoid further fueling Donovan's smug speculation. Meanwhile, Ethan was at the heart of a conversation about ambitious new developments. A quick glance around the room told him how carefully everyone was observing him. He forced a confident laugh, reciting the standard lines about forging ahead, ensuring robust returns, and planning for expansions into neighboring cities. However, there was an unmistakable tension in his posture. At one point, he spotted Zachary, who was speaking quietly with a couple of other investors. An irrational surge of jealousy struck him, remembering how Zachary had been spending time with Charlotte. Was his wife confiding in Zachary about personal matters? The thought unnerved him, further splintering the composure he tried to maintain. Isabella arrived an hour into the reception, wearing an understated yet elegant dress, determined not to draw undue attention. She felt compelled to appear in a professional capacity, believing she still held a vital role in Ethan's enterprise. But the moment she entered the spacious lounge, she sensed the eyes on her, a swirl of whispers, instantly igniting about the mistress, brazen enough to show up. Ethan saw her too, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. While he'd asked her to keep a low profile, he hadn't explicitly forbidden her attendance. She caught his gaze, an unspoken question in her eyes. "Do you want me gone?" He gave a slight shake of his head. He couldn't afford another public spectacle, then turned back to his conversation. Isabella, swallowing her discomfort, found a corner near the bar to stand quietly. It wasn't long before Donovan Reyes sidled up to her. "Miss Marlow, correct? I've heard about your strategic insights with Harrington Real Estate." She nodded, wary. "Yes, I manage special projects and expansions." Donovan's smile was cordial, though his eyes gleamed with a predator's curiosity. Must be quite the balancing act, especially these days. Isabella detected the double meaning. "Every business faces challenges," she said smoothly, "but I'm confident in our forward momentum." He took a sip of his drink. "I admire confidence. Yet, with swirling rumors and potential boardroom battles, one might question if the Harrington brand is sturdy enough to weather certain personal storms." His insinuations lingered in the air. She stiffened. "Mr. Harrington is capable of separating business from personal life. Our developments remain on track." Donovan chuckled. "Ah, Miss Marlow, if only walls between personal and professional matters were so neatly sealed. Well, best of luck." With that, he moved on, leaving Isabella fuming over his veiled jabs. In a far corner, Ethan was cornered by another investor, demanding assurances that next quarter's forecasts wouldn't be derailed by family drama. Ethan insisted that everything was under control, but the investor's skeptical look said otherwise. By the evening's end, Ethan felt drained, aware that no matter how many polished promises he offered, trust had been rattled. As the crowd dispersed, Zachary briefly touched Ethan's shoulder. "Hey, might want to take a breather. You look worn out." Ethan gave a curt nod, tension etched in every line of his face. He glanced at Isabella, who lingered by the exit, casting him an uncertain look. "Yeah, thanks," he murmured, but his tone lacked warmth. Walking out, Ethan realized just how fragile his position had become. The veneer of success he wore was cracking under the combined weight of scandal and fear. Even if Charlotte chose not to file for divorce immediately, the rumor alone might hamper his expansion deals. He had become a man racing against time, scrambling to keep the pillars of his empire upright, all while the foundation his marriage continued to crumble beneath him. On a brisk afternoon, Charlotte stood in the grand foyer of the Harrington estate, her suitcases beside her. She had finally decided to leave for a while at least, to clear her mind from the claustrophobic tension that suffocated the mansion. Her destination was a secluded cottage near the coastline, owned by a cousin who had offered it for as long as she needed. There, she would have space to think about her child's future without constant reminders of Ethan's betrayal. Ethan approached, eyes clouded with desperation. "You're leaving?" He glanced at her suitcases, his voice cracking. "Charlotte, please, can't we talk?" She drew a controlled breath. "We've done nothing but hurl accusations and half apologies at each other. You can't keep me here against my will. I need clarity for myself and for our baby. Believe it or not, I don't want us at each other's throats." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "Don't," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm too hurt, and the trust is gone." In the silence that followed, Ethan looked as if he might collapse under the weight of his regret. "At least let me know where you'll be. I'll send you an address," she replied. "But I want space. No surprise visits." Then she stepped out into the crisp air, leaving the once imposing home behind as Reggie, the loyal driver, loaded her luggage into the car. In those tense moments, Ethan felt a sting of finality. He realized that Charlotte's departure could be the prelude to divorce, or maybe just a trial separation. Either way, the emotional vacuum weighed on him. Back inside, he found the hush of the estate unnerving. Every echo in the grand corridors reminded him of how thoroughly he had shattered the harmony they once shared. Later that day, he reached out to Isabella, half out of habit and half out of desperation. She arrived at his office, wearing a crisp blouse and pencil skirt, trying to maintain a veneer of professionalism despite the swirl of conflicting emotions inside her. She sat across from him at the large desk, noticing how tired he looked. "I need your take on the next steps," Ethan began, sliding a file toward her. "These are potential partners for expansions in the next quarter. My usual circle is skittish, so I'm forced to look for alternative funding." Isabella glanced through the papers. "Some of these groups are less stable than we'd prefer. High risk, high reward. Are you sure this is wise right now?" He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Not particularly. But I'm cornered. If I don't push forward, the rumors might morph into a self-fulfilling prophecy, investors withdrawing because they think we're going under." They talked shop for an hour, charting strategies, analyzing financial models. Yet, at the back of Isabella's mind lingered the unspoken question, what about us? Eventually, she mustered the courage to broach the subject. "Ethan," she said quietly, placing the documents aside, "where does our relationship stand?" He gazed at her with hollow eyes. "Charlotte left the estate. We're in limbo. I have no idea if she'll file for divorce. My lawyers say I should try to reconcile, at least to prevent a public legal battle." A pulse of pain throbbed in Isabella's chest. "So you want me to vanish? Pretend we never happened?" "Because if she decides on reconciliation, I can't be around." Ethan tried to form a response, but faltered. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "My life is in pieces. Part of me still wants you, but I also can't ignore what's at stake with Charlotte. The baby and the business. Isabella swallowed the knot in her throat. All her prior confidence in capturing Ethan's devotion now felt like a foolish fantasy. I won't wait forever, Ethan. I can't remain your best-kept secret while you hope to salvage your public image. That's not living. He raked a hand through his hair. I understand. I just need more time. She gave a sad laugh, fighting back tears she refused to shed. You always need more time. Gathering her things, Isabella left his office, a swirl of emotions tangling in her chest. Anger, regret, a lingering hope she couldn't quite extinguish. She'd reached a crossroads where her desire for the life Ethan symbolized warred with her growing realization that he might never truly choose her. Meanwhile, Charlotte arrived at the coastal cottage. The sea air and the sound of crashing waves provided a stark contrast to Greenwich's manicured lawns. She settled into the cozy space, far smaller than the Harrington mansion, but infinitely more peaceful. Each morning, she took contemplative walks along the shoreline, feeling the baby's kicks as a reminder of what mattered most. She also spent time on the phone with her lawyer, shaping contingency plans. Thomas Bentley explained that she held a strong position given the prenup's infidelity clause. Still, she hesitated to wield that power as a cudgel. Part of her considered trying to salvage the marriage if Ethan would genuinely repent. Yet, her pride and wounded heart cautioned against trusting him. Zachary called occasionally, checking on her well-being with a gentle tone that never crossed boundaries. Their conversations offered her solace. She appreciated his ability to speak openly about the complicated nature of heartbreak. In truth, she felt a budding warmth in his kindness, a flicker she tried to downplay, given her complicated circumstances. One late afternoon, after a contemplative walk on the beach, Charlotte returned to find a letter slipped under the cottage door. It was from Ethan. Briefly, her heart jumped, wondering if he'd driven all the way out. She opened the envelope to find a handwritten note. I know I can't fix what I've broken overnight, but please talk to me. Let me be there for our child. I'm lost without you. She read it over twice, tears brimming. She felt the old tug of nostalgia for the man she once believed Ethan to be. But she also recalled the image of him in that intimate restaurant booth, leaning close to Isabella. Folding the note, she set it on the table, uncertain whether to respond. Her next choice could define everything: her future, her baby's upbringing, and maybe even the empire Ethan so desperately tried to preserve. Far away, in Greenwich, that same tension clung to Ethan's steps as he exited his office building at dusk, aware that no matter how meticulously he worked on deals, it might all crumble if Charlotte unleashed the evidence of his affair. At the same time, Isabella wondered how long she'd cling to someone who refused to claim her openly. And in her quiet seaside refuge, Charlotte began realizing that sometimes the only way forward is to walk away from the illusions you've outgrown, even if it means shattering the gilded cage you once called home. Wealth and power promise the world, yet behind the refined smiles and expensive suits, hidden turmoil can transform a glamorous life into a fragile facade. Ethan Harrington's empire trembles at its foundation as broken vows and explosive truths threatened to destroy the very legacy he worked so hard to build. Caught in the fallout, Charlotte stands poised to reclaim her autonomy, and Isabella grapples with the realization that empty promises rarely become reality. If this tangled tale of passion and betrayal kept you on edge, remember to show your support. Hit the like button, share this story with friends who love high-stakes drama, and subscribe for more riveting narratives. What do you think awaits Ethan, Charlotte, and Isabella on the other side of heartbreak and ambition? Let us know your thoughts. Your engagement keeps these stories alive, fueling more twists and real-life lessons still to come.